Welcome back to episode 16 of the Future Proof PT podcast. In today's episode, Alex and I are introducing the concept of having the explorer's mindset in therapy practice. That's what we think of as a perspective that actively seeks out new horizons in healthcare delivery rather than simply refining existing approaches. These are quite different things. This framework helps us understand why some practitioners and organizations thrive amid healthcare transformation while others struggle to adapt. An explorer in therapy practice isn't just someone who stays current with research, but they're someone who fundamentally questions assumptions about care delivery and business models and the profession's role in the evolving healthcare ecosystem. We're examining what this mindset looks like in action and why it matters now more than ever. The contrast between explorers and other mindsets became more evident as we discussed several key themes. So we're talking about first emerging research and clinical implications. We're taking a little bit different direction here, but when we think more about it kind of thematically, it isn't so foreign to other things that we've discussed, just a little bit different. So Alex highlighted some fascinating developments in cellular level research regarding mitochondrial DNA's influence on movement disorders. And he didn't bring it up just because it's academic knowledge. He's trying to make that connection as an opportunity to fundamentally reimagine treatment approaches for neurological conditions when it comes to physical therapy. Listen and hear more about that. Explorers actively seek out this type of emerging science and consider how it might transform their clinical reasoning, while others might wait for it to be distilled into standardized protocols. And then we talked about reimagining the patient journey. That's a theme that's come up in prior podcast episodes, but this has a bit of a different twist. We talked about reimagining the patient journey. In this discussion, we talked about how differently the patient experience can be structured depending on how you approach a treatment protocol and consider what a patient journey could look like. So we related this to what an explorer might ask, something like, does a patient with low back pain truly need 16 to 20 visits or more of hands-on care? Or could we achieve even better outcomes more efficiently with 6 visits or 8 visits, followed by digital support or hybrid care or potentially, follow-up connection with that patient? And we're not talking about it from the perspective of reducing care. We're talking about optimizing the patient journey to achieve either pain relief or independence or whatever the end goal is of the therapy treatment protocol based on the prognosis, of course. How do we achieve it more efficiently? And that's really suited very well to the explorer who might be more open to and ready for value-based care models. Alex paints a scenario of 2 demographically identical patients receiving dramatically different care paths and illustrates this during our conversation. And he asks, do these divergent approaches coexist within a single practice? And this is something that, practice owners face today. Can you simultaneously operate under multiple care models with different incentives? Or does transformation require fully committing to a new approach? Can you be straddling fee-for-service and value-based care? This is a question therapists are not going to be the first to explore. Perhaps the most striking insight was Alex's observation about how therapists help patients recognize and build upon their strengths, yet collectively we struggle to do the same for our profession. The gap between the actual value therapists provide and our ability to communicate that value creates the perfect opportunity for outside disruption. Ideally, we would disrupt internally as innovative thinkers within our own profession, therapy disrupting itself. Historically, disruption happens, and we talk a little bit about what that might look like. So explorers don't just deliver excellent care, they can articulate its value in terms that resonate with patients, payers, and health systems. And this ability to translate clinical and business languages is increasingly becoming a differentiator for successful practices, therapy, or other types of practices. Then Alex and I talk about balancing evidence with innovation. The tension between evidence-based practice and innovation emerged as another key theme of the pod. So while our profession rightfully values research-backed approaches, explorers recognize that sometimes waiting for more evidence becomes an excuse to avoid necessary change. They balance rigorous clinical standards with the willingness to thoughtfully experiment with new care delivery models before all the evidence is in. When we talk about value-based care, a lot of the models are innovation models. They take a hypothesis about what a change in certain incentives might be and what it might create in terms of behavior change, and we test that over a period of time. Their physicians and health systems are doing this regularly now, right? They're participating in innovative models over a period of time because they feel that they can take the potential levers of the models and be successful. Then Alex and I talk about disruptors that are impacting the therapy market, whether we are aware of it or not. And we examined a bit about why therapy point solutions are, picking up traction with payers and health systems. So the external disruptors aren't succeeding in whatever way that they are because they provide necessarily better clinical care than therapists do. But they're succeeding because they've packaged therapy expertise in ways that solve specific problems for specific stakeholders. They have found ways to take the inefficiencies and the opportunities to think differently about how care is delivered by therapists for patients. And they have taken a different mindset for packaging those services. So by doing so, they're speaking that language of value, efficiency, and outcomes in a way that resonates with stakeholders that are looking for those solutions. And explorers will study these market dynamics, not to fear disruption, but because they want to learn from it. They recognize that therapists have the clinical expertise these companies are trying to replicate, and what's needed is business and innovation mindset to leverage the knowledge effectively. Alex does an assessment of readiness for value-based care by recognizing that perhaps, a lot of therapists are not ready for value-based care contracting, and that there's really a mindset shift that has to happen. So it's not just about learning the mechanics of participating in a new type of program, but it's about reimagining what a therapy practice means in a healthcare system that's increasingly rewarding long-term or episodic or longitudinal outcomes rather than volume of care delivered. Explorers are not going to wait for perfect clarity before taking steps towards this future. Alex has a lottery ticket parable that you should enjoy around this topic and talks about how the profession's been hesitant to proactively engage with healthcare transformation. The lottery ticket for therapy practices today might be investing time in understanding risk-based contracts, exploring digital health partnerships, redesigning practice workflows to better capture and demonstrate value to the stakeholders that care about that. And we talk about a culture of curiosity. So through the conversation, we're touching on how practice leaders can foster an explorer's mindset within their teams. And that involves psychological safety for questioning established approaches. It means encouraging professional development beyond clinical skills to include business and innovation concepts and maybe policy, and modeling a learning orientation that views challenges as opportunities, not threats. We think the practices that thrive in the next decade will be those that cultivate this type of curious, adaptive culture, where team members feel empowered to experiment with new approaches while maintaining an unwavering commitment to patient outcomes. It's not that they're losing something. It's this type of transformation should be positive for patients and, yield a more gratifying experience for the therapists themselves. So to wrap it up, before we get into our conversation, we don't mean for our conversations to always be comfortable. We mean for them more to be catalyzing. The explorer's mindset that we advocate requires questioning established practices, reimagining care delivery, having courage to venture into unfamiliar territory before you're really ready. And we think this approach isn't just beneficial for individual practices, but for our profession to remain central and grow in healthcare's future. Consider, if you will, how might adopting more of an explorer's mindset transform your practice? What small experiments could you run to test new approaches? What assumptions about therapy delivery might be worth questioning? The future belongs to those willing to explore it. Hope you enjoy this next episode.
There's been a lot of interesting research that's been coming out that is more on a probably the geeky cellular level viral infiltration and the mitochondrial DNA being influenced, and that's like a lot of the movement impairment disorders, so a lot of neurological movement disorders,
We'll
like
talk
it's
about it. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
so
something I don't think enough about.
yeah, so that's like we tend to like the forest tree analogy, right? So we go in the forest and we forget to look at the trees. But we tend to blame neurological disorders on their face value for the symptoms that they produce, which obviously they're pretty debilitating. But we fail to research the actual origin of what causes some people to develop MS, right? And why is there so much variance to MS, and what is the predictors of MS? And so now there's been a pretty good body of research in terms of immunological effect and the immune system response to some of the pathogens, right? But even the pathogenesis is not well established. So there's been a virological hypothesis where
Hmm.
it's the way you respond to viruses, but not even all the viruses, the penetration of the viruses into the mitochondrial DNA, and hence the energy crisis and insufficiency and loss of equilibrium. And it's a cascading event. And some individuals are able to cascade and recover, some individuals cascade and plateau, and some individuals cascade and decline. But what are the predictors? Is it the volume of the viral load? Is it the type of viral load? Is it something about our own human phenotype that there's just a natural variance? So that's been very, very good and interesting research, which I personally it has to make sense, and it makes sense to me that there's more, there's deeper. Like it's not just turtles and type of turtles. You have to dig deeper to understand this instead of saying that so now you're blessed with this diagnosis. Now let's just manage your symptoms. Like no, I mean there has to be more. So that's been interesting.
And
One,
so,
and
where's
then
the
there's
research been coming out of?
so it's Journal of Nature, like a National Academy of Sciences. It's been like high level stuff that's really creating. If you ever follow like Eric Topol
Hmm.
is very very well established. He's a cardiologist, I think, by training, but he's a terrific science communicator, and he does a really good job bringing up to date all of the research that will impact us on this at scale, humanity, right, at scale. So, and that's been part of his rhetoric. He is also very big on, he is an aging zealot. So, and so like, what are the steps to ensure healthy aging? And that viral protection and viral load is one of it. So like all of, and we can tie this to the national lobby, that all of the things that we're doing now to fight mRNA vaccines, that's actually the research that's leading to a lot of these things potentially being protective. So there's mRNA pharmacology and mRNA structure is what will help us beat or at least postpone some of these deleterious effects of these diseases. So,
I didn't
but
know
now we're
that.
canceling funding on a lot of them, right? So we have, I know,
They have some funding problems right now.
I know. So this is like, so we have a potential of actually, I can't say cure, but really get rid of a lot of MS, a lot of Parkinson's type syndromes, right? Because MS is a bucket syndrome. It's not a single syndrome. Parkinson's is a bucket syndrome. There's Parkinsonism, right? And there's Parkinson's like disorders. So, and a lot of them have a potential of being protected from by this mRNA technology, but that requires research and funding and failure ultimately, that the 99% of the research will fail. But I think that's where we will ultimately have these vaccines from Parkinson's disease. We'll have vaccines from MS, and we'll also have treatments from MS and Parkinson's disease. But without funding, it's all gone. So that's my spiel. That's my research geeking out. That's been interesting. There's a article that just come out like yesterday at night that I'll probably post today, but it's a natural experiment about how our environment influences physical activity. So it's that that outside in, inside out, but the environment it has a direct correlate to the physical activity, the way we structure cities. So now this is
Yeah.
a large, like a 2.5 million cohort of US based smartphone users. So they're tracking the like it's big sample, big study, and longitudinal study that like we really are trapped in our environment. So when like potentially looking into the real estate, when you're trying to buy a house, don't just look at the house, look at the neighborhood. And when you're looking at the neighborhood, look at the walkability of that neighborhood. If you're driving, like if you're like looking for new real estate and you're driving and you don't see a single person on the street, I don't think you should really be getting into that house. It's like if you're driving in a neighborhood where you're looking to invest into and you're seeing people walking and running, yeah, that's a good investment because that is actually the investment into your general health. Like forget
Oh,
about the real
good.
estate and equity. That like it's like where you live is going to be predictive to how your health is going to be. There was a article that I posted yesterday about like that the financial crisis of 2008 and the impact on chronic and persistent pain and
Mhm.
how different cultural. Oh yeah, so this is a brilliant study. So also how the economics and how financial security impacts pain perception. Like it's like
Do you have
that. I'll post it in our show notes.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I think it would be really interesting. We've talked about you doing this before, but if you wanna just kinda just share how what your process is for reviewing literature on a day-to-day basis, I think that like, that insight into how does Alex every day post such important journal articles? Where do they come from? How does he weed through it? Where do you find them? Where do you store them?
So I store all my articles on Zotero. So I have probably a couple of thousand pieces of literature there. So that like that's all the bucket list. If I come to a are global ideas or concepts that I want to research for the week. And so on Saturday or Sunday, I will come up with a concept that I want to research. And that's how I pick the articles for that I will post in the morning. Those are
Where do
all
you
pre.
get them, though? Where do you
So
find them?
then my resources are there is a consensus is an AI engine that looks for articles and you can select the strength, the time, the country, like so you can be very specific about how you harvest these articles. My old way was just going to Google Scholar and looking through Google Scholar. I think not a bad method is to find an article that really resonates with you, and especially if it's a well researched piece of literature, then start following those researchers. So that in academia, right, you tend to be clustered and you tend to be more siloed in how you conduct research. But to us, it's actually a benefit because we can take these silos and learn more and more. And then like a lot of it is just curiosity too, right? So like it's that old Russian fable where like I don't even know if it translates well, but it's a guy who was trying to pull a pumpkin from the ground and like he couldn't, so he asked his friend to pull the, and then the friend helps him, and it's like that. Then there's a cluster of different things, and finally all of them pull the pumpkin out of the ground because it's a shared effort. With this, it's the same. It's the network of different ideas until it leads to something that resonates and pulls a different idea out. But ultimately, then I think it's also be. I think we globally need to look outside of our like allied health and musculoskeletal literature into economic literature, into other adjacent healthcare processes, and into other disciplines. We can't only look in our own discipline. Otherwise, it becomes a more of a confirmation bias, right? We confirm what we already know.
We talk about that a lot, but this really ties it to what your habit is, and I think a lot of the reason that folks follow you, or at least how they started following you, was seeing what you post and feeling like, "Oh, if I follow Alex and I read what he posts, at least I'm keeping up in some way with literature." You and I talk on the podcast a lot about silos and PTs getting out of their silos. This is kinda tying the 2 together really nicely.
Yeah, there was a there still is a guy who used to like, have a website called Science Physio, Eric Muir. So Eric was brilliant, and he taught classes with Meekins at one time, and like just a really smart dude. I think he's in Oregon, and so he had that structure of how we consume research, and so like 97% of us will just read the headline or the title,
Yep.
and that would be it, right? And then the 2% will read the abstract, and then the 1% will actually read the body of the literature. And I don't think that's like, I think it's a fair structure. It's a fair way to read. Like if all you read is a title, and that starts an idea cycle, because a lot of it has to process and resonate. It's fair. It's kosher. So it's kosher to just read the title and move on. But then if you're curious, come back to it and just read the abstract, and so you can understand a little bit more about the mechanism of how this research came to be. Also very kosher, very fair, works for most people. And then if you really want to geek out, then like read the PDF. You have the 10 pages to go through. Like most of it is like noise anyways, because like you don't need the structure unless you're trying to reproduce the literature. And personally, to me, the precision and virality of the research and the granularity, I would just say, of the research is not as important. Like even if they didn't do a good job randomizing the study, fine, right? Like even if
Mhm.
it was an underpowered study, fine. Like it's still like because I am a consumer, I consume a lot of research, but don't substantiate it as much. Like for it fits my model. But if you were someone who needs to really pick deeper into research, then find 2 or 3 articles a week, and that's really all you should consume. Like that's like that is a strategy. Like it's that like the ant versus I forgot the analogy of different animals, how they choose like spider, like so ant versus a spider, right? So ant picks little pieces and carries it into his ant cave, and then a spider like pulls just one point, and then that's what gets stuck in the spider web. So I'm an ant. I will take the little different pieces and pull it in, and like it will make sense to me ultimately, hopefully. But then if you want to really become much more masterful about one specific topic, then no, that's just pick 1 or 2 articles, and that's what you should follow. But
You know
ultimately, I
what's
think,
interesting, Alex, about as you're talking about your process here and doing kind of medical research, I think that the parallel sort of between the two of our worlds and how we spend our time consuming is that both of us through either our jobs or hobbies or both consume a lot of, real-time information. I spend obviously most of my time focused on health policy content consumption, whether it's, some of it's opinions and blogs written by experts, some of it's specific research and then extrapolating that to the impacts on policy. But I think between the two of us, right, on a weekly basis, we're consuming dozens and dozens of between blogs and research articles, content that informs our thinking and evolves how we think about healthcare writ large. If people working in healthcare would spend just a tiny fraction of that time, a few minutes a week, reading about medical research, whatever topic you're just interested in that week, given all the tools we have now and AI and things like consensus and places to store them. And then some on the policy side, because understanding the business and the policy of healthcare combined with, we talk about silos with PT, but it's also silos, the folks living in the policy space and the folks living in the treatment space, they're also, really overlapping. They're living these kind of parallel career lives, and those crisscross infrequently, right? So I
yeah.
think just the two of us and our kind of how we interact with each other and discuss the applicability of the things that each of us pay more or less attention to is can be extrapolated to everybody. Are you more, along the lines of the research that Alex does, or are you more along the lines of the research that I do? I should be putting a lot more effort into the research that you do, paying a lot more attention to that. So maybe that's like my own call to action. I like to say, if you want to listen to read one thing, just read the health affairs, free articles. Just subscribe to the population health series and the forefront series, get it in your inbox, skim it, and it'll open you up pretty easily to what is happening. And it's really approachable. It's really meant for healthcare providers and professionals, not just policymakers, and to bridge those gaps. I had this little revelation when you were talking, like, we kind of approach information consumption as something that's really important.
I think it's because Dana, if I was to take liberty to say that we're both explorers and we're both not settled in where we are. So in a way,
Yes.
it is a personality trait because we're not comfortable just settling in and just living out the rest of our lives with the same source of truth, right? Like, and
That's why we get each
I don't
other.
know. Right? Like, but I think a lot of what we do can help people set up a framework for deeper understanding. So, like, if you are building a puzzle, like when you are building a puzzle, nobody starts building a puzzle from the middle. People start building a puzzle by creating a frame, and then once you create a frame, you start putting the pieces together to get a bigger picture. I think a lot of like posting research and reading research, like, and what we can create is the framework, and then how others find these pieces of the puzzle and how it fits their need is going to be up to the consumer, up to the listener, or up to the reader. So I think our job, hopefully, because we're trying to be like communicators, right, and we're communicating that is a source of truth based on our position in the world, and then a consumer, it's up to them to fit their need and to put smaller pieces of the puzzle in. But you're right. You are curious about the policy and this the source of ever evolving nature of the events, right? And your world changes like hourly, not even daily, right? And so like it's so like if you don't keep up with it, then you're left behind. With research, it's a little different. It's more like excavating, like looking for diamonds in the rough, right? So you were just digging, and
Such a great point, Alex.
so like but both, right? So digging in, and if you're satisfied with coal, then that's all you're looking for. And if you're looking for diamonds, then it's a little different research or a little different structure. But if it's coal will like heat up your house for the winter, and then you go deeper. Like both are complementary, and I think both are absent probably in a larger things, because I think most of the other sources of information and data available to our listeners is either for the purpose of self-promotion, right? Like it's just people promoting their cause and their nature, or the purpose of exploration, but not really exploration of depth, exploration that's a little bit more shallow in nature. So I think that's why I think like doing this, and this can even lead us to the next step, right? So like the future coming out of the MadBridge series that we're gonna create, right? And when we're gonna speak with Drew, that's gonna be like this. So it's such an interesting conversation, and getting interesting people in here. Like that's like we're now going to be digging and creating this framework that will continue to complement everybody else, and hopefully again, like it's like you and I are both doing it with absolutely no need for reimbursement, reward, or recognition. Like at least like I don't care if nobody ever says a positive or a negative thing about it, but if there's value, and we've received enough feedback to know that the people do find that there's a value.
And we
That's
want you
great.
to spread it, nerds like us,
Yeah. No, I mean for
middle-aged
sure.
nerds that have been in the profession and in healthcare a long time.
Hmm.
And that have, to your point, we're explorers. Not everybody is, and that's fine. But you need some explorer types to give some thought to, taking time to do research and synthesize that research in some way, whatever it is. There's a lot of things we'll go really like shallow on, but we can at least speak to. So the stuff that you do a lot of research on, I'll skim it and I'll get the takeaway, but it's not where I'm driven, where I will take a totally nerdy policy topic and learn everything I possibly can about it. But then topics that aren't necessarily as, connected to the work that I know and I do, I will be an inch deep. So I'll go really, really deep in some areas and not so deep in others. And I'm sure that's the way you are too. You find certain topics that you're like, okay, this Sunday, this is what I want to research for the week because this really interests me and I want to learn more and more about it. Where other things maybe just are less, appealing to spend a lot of time on. So
For sure, right? I mean, it's it like it, and maybe we like if you like the other link I think I'll include in a source for today is there's a book that I just brushed through, which is called Nine Lies About Work. I think they're from London School of Economics, but it's everything you take as a source of absolute truth in terms of how you're assessed, how your productivity is assessed, how your organization is structured, has fundamentally it's fundamentally flawed and has a very low level of validity. Like your annual review, like the instruments that are being used for annual review, if you want to talk about like failure of validation and failure of common sense, that like all of those instruments are invalid. That the availability heuristic and the recency bias, that most of the managers and bosses tend to assess the productivity of their reports based on the most recent target event project, and tend to not disregard or just not recall anything else that happened. So like when we have these annual points of review, they should completely be outlawed. Nobody should be reviewed annually. If you want accuracy, be reviewed monthly. I think that gives you a little bit more validity, even if it's not a full validity. And more accurately, self-assessment is the most accurate point of assessment. Anyone else, any human agent reviewing another human agent is going to be biased and flawed by their own personal heuristics. And so if you're an administrator and you have 5 reports, you will never be able to accurately review your 5 reports. And if you have 25 reports, that's even less accurate. You have the highest accuracy of reviewing yourself and letting your reports review themselves, and then you can aggregate that data and have a conversation. So, but that's a different segue into completely different territory.
no, but I think that's worth spending a minute on. You and I have had very windy careers, right? And spent time in non-clinical roles of various types. I'm lucky in the role that I have now, and in most of my roles, I've been individual contributor, so I don't have direct reports, so I don't have to do the reviewing. I did in the health system. I had a handful And I tried to be thoughtful, trying to be really objective and have things to say in the reviews that was meaningful. Now, as I get reviewed and I go through that process during the year of saying, well, I don't just want to wait for my 6 month check in and my 1 year review. I tend to make some notes here and there that I can go back to. I store in Notion, and just so that when I have my review, I can say I accomplished these things. I look back at what I established as my goals. Did I achieve them, and how did I go past them? So you can give our listeners some idea of what do you do anything like on a monthly basis to track things you've accomplished, or where you found stumbling blocks, how you overcame them, so that when it comes time to do that, you may not be in a role where you have to do it now, but I'm guessing you have had to do that in the past.
No, for sure. So I think like right now, like you, I'm an independent contributor. So like I'm essentially a consultant that's like I have to fluff my own horn and like, promote myself to be more important than I really am.
No. You're an individual contributor because you're a subject matter expert, and you don't need to also contribute to managing people. That's the way I think of individual contributor
For
roles.
sure, right? For sure. I think again, not to segue, but in Almanac of Naval Ravikant, right? Like there are two economies, and essentially, like you can be a person that gets paid a little to produce a lot if you're working on the assembly line and your only job is to operate the press, or you can be a person that gets paid a lot to produce a little because you are getting paid for your experience, expertise, and ideas. And now those are valuable because you're the only one who has the internal mapping, the cortical structure of your experiences and expertise to have these ideas. Nobody else can because no one else had the same road to where you are. And that's independent contributors are that. And like I've traveled a 23-year-old to a 23 years of experience to actually know what I know and also know what I don't know. And so hopefully
That's
that's
right.
my value, like knowing like well, that's above me.
Right.
Like
But most people never
versus
get to that point.
right? Like so you have like that two different 23-year experiences. One person will have one 23-year experience and one person will have 23 1-year experiences where you're just doing the same thing redundantly. But in my prior life, like so having like being responsible for a territory and having reports, I always found that and right now we're entering a budgeting cycle, right? So as a clinician, we all know that like come September, you're gonna have to start thinking about 2026. And when you're budgeting for your territory for your clinic, like you budget based on from priors and into the future. So if your roadmap and your goal is to show 10% growth in patient numbers, how do you get there? Do you get there through increasing productivity from your reports? You start evaluating your report. It's all about communication and conversation. And the communication conversation is about, at least to me, it was always the absolute transparency. This
Mhm.
is where we are. This is where we need to be. And how do we get there? And can we get there fairly to everyone involved? So if you are reporting to me, do you feel like you are producing at the level where your capacity is being maxed out? Or do you feel like you are underproducing? And you can compare like a productivity based on complexity too, right? Because it's not always the same. You can have a clinician that has a really complex patient load that needs more time with patients. So their patient volume is going to suffer, but then they're being respected and they're drawing more referrals into the clinic because they tend to have draw from larger net of healthcare professionals that refer to them. So even if you're seeing 10 patients a day instead of 20 patients a day, those 10 patients tend to gain a better structure and gain better reputation to our organization. So you are a reputation magnet, even if you're not a patient magnet. And that adds value, but it's hard to objectify that value
Yes.
unless you start looking into that other more granular things. Like look at the diversity of the referral sources this clinician is getting compared to the highly productive clinician who's just getting those post-op patients from the same orthopedic surgeon, right? So they have one referral source versus 10 referral sources. 10 referral sources, that means that there's a much larger network of physicians and clinicians that recognize that what this therapist is doing is a value, and they understand that this is he or she is an expert in the discipline. Someone who's able to pump through 30 patients a day doing these post-op wellness checks. A lot of it is just more mechanistic structure and making sure that nobody falls outside of the norm. It's the same orthopedic surgeon that may have a good relationship with that clinician, and you're good for patient volume, right? That's actually what pays for the lights to be on. But that's not a diverse patient volume. And if that orthopedic surgeon was to move to a different city, or if that orthopedic surgeon was to be somehow alienated by your organization, you just lost 100% of your productivity. But from the budgeting cycle and from that speaking to the reports, someone who is really good about building a network still needs to understand the economics of running an organization. Like you just can't spend an hour and a half with a patient, not in the current state, not in a fee-for-service model, right? So you need to understand, like, you need to then leverage some of the strengths of this highly productive clinician. Someone who's highly productive needs to understand that you have a very linear set of skills that got you to where you are. Now you need to expand your set of skills. So now, what can we do for you to become a more erudite, better rounded clinician? Do we invest in your education? Do we invest in your marketing, where you are promoting your set of skills to other professionals? And I think that's, like, to me as an administrator, that's where the strength is, where understanding each report's strength and having this communication and developing this roadmap together, then everybody has a buy-in, right? Like, it's that 100% transparency. This is where we are, and that's why we're doing this. Not having any ambiguity, because, like, I also, being somebody else's report, have a conversation with a regional administrator or like a VP of ops, right? Like, in this, and it's like, forgive my language, but that pseudo prolific bullshit, right? Like, it's of leaving money under the table, that the productivity rhetoric, like, that's fair, but what do you base it on? And, like, don't compare me to the region and saying that my territory is producing 7% less revenue than the rest of the region, unless you assess the general location, the payer mix, everything else. So, like, let's dig deeper into this and see if we can understand this. And potentially, yeah, you're right. That's on me. I have failed this year because I overlooked A, B, and C. Or it's on you. Like, what you were seeing and how you're judging my KPIs is not fair based on where my territory is compared to the other territory you're comparing me to, right? So it's that, again, that the complexity and that layers and turtles on top of turtles. So the
Uh-huh.
framework and then putting the pieces of puzzle into it.
It's making me think now, as you talk about the different types of therapists, different value that they may bring. So that's in kind of your fee for service structure. Now think about, let's say, a region. Let's say it's, I don't know, greater New York City area. Let's say everybody, all the physicians and health systems are in full risk value based contracts, right? Providers that are contracting directly with payers are getting a monthly set amount of money, and then they can be rewarded on the back end for additional dollars. Like, a lot of times it'll be a higher reimbursement than historical if it's primary care. And if the payer wants to make sure there's enough funding for primary care to do all of the rich wraparound services, which we argue should include therapy. So let's say I'm a therapy clinic and I'm in a region that all of the physicians, the primary care physicians at least, are in full risk contracts, meaning they have a set amount of money. It can be higher, and they're going to be looked at the back end for how they impacted total spend, right? So did they reduce hospitalizations? Now, if I'm a therapist in a clinic and I'm working with, these are my major referral sources, or the 3 primary care clinics that are in these contracts. Now, what is a clinic owner? First of all, does a clinic owner make themselves aware of these structures? So that's question 1. And then question 2, how does it change just in the first step? Let's say they're just becoming aware of it. They're just thinking about having conversations with their referral partners about what can we do to help you be successful? What are your risks? What do you think about as your financial risks or to the downside that we can help you support? Let's say they're just in those early conversations. What is the clinic owner or the manager now going to share with their therapist about this, and when? And then how does it change their expectations of their therapist? How do those expectations now change?
I think it's right on. So there's one nuance here that we absolutely have to also look into, and that is, we always think about growth through addition. And so everything I described is growth through addition, adding
Yep.
value, adding payers, adding resources. What you're describing is actually growth through subtraction.
Yep.
Which is, if you subtract
It's not an
unnecessary cost.
oxymoron.
No, like, right? So it's growth through subtraction, where you cut away waste, you cut away noise, you cut away low value care, you cut away redundancy, and all of a sudden you're growing and you haven't gained any resources, but you've just subtracted a lot of these impactful but low value modalities that are really cutting away to your profitability. And here you are just to help your enterprise grow by not adding, but by subtracting. So, and I think it's so important for hopefully our listeners to also understand this, that growth is not always achieved by you adding an extra referral source, by you showing more productivity, by you seeing 10 more patients. Growth can also be shown that through efficiency, through optimization, through cutting away redundancy, in terms of, do I really need to supervise a customer or patient for the duration, right? Do I really need to be present for all 18 visits of care? And that's hopefully when we're having this discussion with Drew a couple of weeks, it's that who is an allied health professional? What is the responsibility of the DPT compared to the PTA? And do we have these well-aligned structures that I will do a thorough, clinically relevant, objective assessment, but then it will be somebody else who will actually see the plan of care into execution? That's like, that would be a growth through subtraction, where I haven't added more patient volume, but I was able to more efficiently distribute sources and resources to maximize on our billing potential, right? So I think to me that really is like changes the optics and changes the appreciation of it, right? So.
Yep. I think there's just so much we could have a whole episode just peeling the layers back of that.
I think it's essentially both are beneficial structures, and both models need to be implemented into any enterprise, whether you're looking into that microeconomic enterprise or just operating your business, like running a business efficiently, right? Like you have a goal in mind, and is that goal objective, and is it structured based on a objective foundation? I want to generate 27% profit above cost running my enterprise. Well, how did you get to 27%? Well, that's an industry standard. Why is it an industry standard? That's the way we've been operating all this time. Well, like, so you keep digging deeper, right? The Toyota 5 whys, keep asking why until you get to the bottom where is it valid or invalid? 27% is a fluff number. That's arbitrary. Like, it was just created. Like, are you comfortable then generating 10% profit and still being happy with your productivity? Or is 27% an absolute, fundamental absolute? And then, even though it's subjective, that's yours, right? You are the source of truth for that organization. You are the business owner. Compared to, like, no, I can probably be at peace with 10% profit, but I will pay my clinicians more so that we reduce the burnout and we improve clinician satisfaction. Also fair, right? Like, are you comfortable doing that? Or are you comfortable asking your clinicians to maximize their productivity? Because, like, again, in that traditional fee-for-service model, like, nothing's for nothing. You just have to keep pumping them through the door, keep the revolving door open. Versus in a value-based model, are you comfortable taking on risk and taking on patients, saying that we will capitate the visits based on risk, and then we're going to digitize some of that patient encounters and experience now because that costs less and still provides valuable care, right? Like, are we able to provide a more of a hybrid solution as a traditional business owner? Are we able to look into these higher risk individuals and still provide care, but through a platform that's less expensive than a traditional face-to-face in-person care? So, like, and that is the prime directive, right? That those are the four objectives of value-based models.
Do you think, Alex, kind of going a little further on down those lines, do you think that a therapy clinic owner, your average therapy clinic owner, let's say, or even go to a highly informed therapy clinic owner who understands the dynamic of fee for service and value based care, do you think that they're ready if I'm gonna paint a scenario, all right? A
Hmm.
group, let's say it's 10 primary care docs and APPs, they get into their entire patient panel is now going to be full risk contracts. So again, full risk, and the way I'm using it is you're paid a capitated amount, but that amount will go up or down over the course of that year based upon the performance of, or I shouldn't say the performance, based upon the health of the population. So if they use less high acuity services and they remain healthier, if their diseases are managed better, if they're compliant with their medications, right? If all of those things are true, that primary care practice won't just get their capitation, they will get additional, often significant additional dollars as a sharing agreement. The payer saves because there's less hospitalizations, less use of high cost MRIs, right? All of that stuff.
Hmm.
But if they don't do a good job and hospitalizations go up and historic spend continues to creep up, they are at risk of having to pay the payer back for not meeting their end of the bargain. That's the scenario. They come to your therapy clinic because they have a long-standing working relationship with you, and they know in their data that their spend for, let's call it, total joint replacement, for low back pain, for give 4 or 5 different, right, areas where there's a lot of underutilization of therapy, but higher utilization could lead to better spend in other areas. They come to you and say, we would like to get into an agreement with you. Let's say it's just shared savings upside only. If you will partner with us and help us achieve these goals for these patient types that we know are out of the range of where they should be, right? The spending is too high. We're not doing as good of a job as we could. And we know your expertise, if we could arrange some kind of structure, could help us be successful. We're willing to share some of that with you. Do you think therapists, if like our therapy owner would know even what they would want to ask for or what they could commit to? Could they commit to something like, if you however the communication method works, you will somehow see any patient we refer within 24 hours, even if you have to go to their home to see them, right? You will help us increase our patients that come in for their annual wellness visits by 5%, and you will give us their full risk assessment to go with it and any flags you catch. Like, do you think that therapists are prepared to have those conversations with at-risk providers now? And what do you think it would take to get them ready?
So short answer is no. I don't think that they're ready. I think it's such a globally different way of looking at the productivity matrix, and it's such a different way of looking into healthcare that most of the traditional business owners have been indoctrinated into this specific standardized model of productivity, which is based on Henry Ford's assembly line structure, right? Just get them in, get them out. Like anything that has to do with risk is a very foreign concept to a traditional practice owner. At the same time, do I think we can get them ready? Absolutely. I think we can get them ready by creating a marketplace for some of these risk-based contracts where they will know that like there's other ways of generating revenue that's not from just productivity, like with assembly line productivity, but at what price and with what constraints and how many are actually going to be willing to participate. And can you have a business that participates in a both traditional production-based model as well as a risk-based model? Because there's like, can you at the same time see in the same clinic someone who is being seen for 46 visits for a nominal diagnosis and someone who's being seen for only 6 visits and being told to transition to a digital platform? We've maximized the in-person value because you no longer need somebody to hold your hand, right? You are creating a more of a patient-centered approach. Like you are creating a world where you're empowering an individual to self-care instead of providing the redundant low-value care. So how do you separate, right? Like how do you say like, well, for you, I'm just going to continue to hold your hand for the next 6 months because we're going to generate $107 from every visit, and for you, we're going to see you for 6 visits, and then I need you to follow what the plan of care that I've provided for you, and we'll touch base once a month. And both of you will probably have very similar demographic criteria, right? You're both 55-year-old males with lower back pain. Can you provide that same line of business? And then patient A, who's been there for an eternity, looking at patient B, who's being told to go home after 6 visits. And like it's an interesting dynamic, right? Can you, or do you need a like this a specialization where you're going to have only a fee-for-service clinic, or you're going to have a risk-based clinic, but they're going to be two independent enterprise, right? So it's an interesting analysis, right?
I guess the follow-up thought to that is that lack of awareness means that disruptors see, number one, all of the capability that the therapy profession and the work that therapists do as highly undervalued by the healthcare delivery system. And so innovators come in and they say, you have all of this like really evidence-based, upstream, conservative care that is a natural source of patient engagement, creation, and trust building, et cetera. And since therapists don't realize themselves, right? Hundreds of thousands of therapists in this country, they're not necessarily as a whole aware of the high value they bring in an at-risk, right, new paradigm where we're looking at having the right care at the right time. They're not aware of this, so we're going to just disrupt it with a combination of things like getting more specific about the frequency and duration, plugging in digital health solutions, hybrid models, care navigation. These are the disruptors that are here right now. It doesn't mean that they're doing as good a job as therapists could do if therapists were the innovators doing it. But this is where I feel like there's this like, call to action for therapists. There's a reason why these innovators are making headway, and by being stuck sometimes in our own profession and what we think the capabilities are and what our value is, and being driven by, unfortunately, a fee-for-service environment that has led us to this. It's not like this is all therapists' fault. We just have been led down this path because of the way we incentivize care in this country and how we're paid. But this is happening right now, right? Care provided by therapists is being disrupted by new innovators who see the value in ways therapists don't, and they can find efficiencies, and even more importantly, they know how to sell these new efficiencies at low cost to primary care providers who can then circumvent a lot of the therapy care that, number one, patients a lot of times aren't going for. They make referrals, they never go, and then they end up getting additional high-cost care by orthopedists, et cetera, right? And number two, they can get more for their money potentially with these combination solutions that are more specific and help achieve patient needs. It's still going to only be a fraction of what they could accomplish if the innovators were therapists themselves. For me, that's the call to action here. If we don't have these conversations and become our own disruptors, we're already seeing it happening. And now is as things are evolving so quickly, and AI is, honestly, it's changing how healthcare is provided. If we don't get on board and get too stuck in our cheese, we're going to be cut out of it. A lot
Yeah.
of it. So
There's this old rabbinical fable, right, of this really financially unfortunate but this pious individual that keeps asking God to win lottery. And so every day he prays that he's been a good person, he's been a good man, he's been a good individual. Can he just win a lottery? He's so poor, his shoes are so old, his clothing have holes in it, and he has to win a lottery. And so he goes through an entire life, dies from old age, and ascends to wherever the afterlife is, and asks during the conversation that follow-up briefing, I've been such a good person, I've done everything you've asked me to
yeah,
do, to be why can't I, why couldn't you just make me win a lottery? And the guy answers, I wanted you to win a lottery, but you had to buy a ticket. Um, so it's we have to buy a ticket, right? We have to take the next step as a community. And what will it take to take the next step? I think at a certain point, as a community, we've been predominantly reactive, not proactive. So we react to trauma, we react to changes. We never foresee it's coming. Value-based care is coming. If you look into just in the community, it's it's been coming for 20 years, right? We're very dismissive of these ascending models because we tend to see them as a potential, right? And yet here we are, we're drowning in our own shit, but but we are drowning from this poorly managed or mismanaged ops for the last 25 years. We're losing workforce, but we're still failing to see that we need to buy this lottery. We need to go out and look into these risk-based contracts, at least explore, at least understand what they are and how to operationalize them, right? But yeah, I'm optimistic because I think the better days ahead, because that's my nature. But I'm also realistic that it may take a catastrophe for those models to be absorbed. And we just want to be on a good end. We want to be on a high hill when a catastrophe hits, right? So
you have a way of explaining things that's very relatable. I love your parables. As we come to the close of this episode, we want to leave you with something more than just information, but something that leaves you with a sense of possibility. We traveled through a landscape of ideas today that challenge how we think about therapy practice, from the cellular level research reshaping our understanding of movement disorders to the stark reality that our profession stands at a crossroads between tradition and transformation. The truth is, the healthcare system's changing with or without us. The question isn't whether therapy will evolve, it's whether therapists will be the ones leading that evolution. Think about that moment Alex described, with two identical patients with back pain receiving dramatically different care paths, one trapped in a cycle of dependency and the other empowered through focused intervention and technology. Which practitioner would you rather be, and which approach truly honors our profession's highest purpose? Which do you think will really be future-proof? Or consider the irony that we expertly help patients recognize their strengths while collectively failing to champion our own profession's unique value. We hold the clinical expertise that outside disruptors are trying to replicate, yet we hesitate to step into our power as healthcare innovators. Alex's lottery ticket parable speaks directly to this moment. We keep hoping for better outcomes, more respect from other providers, better reimbursement, stronger recognition of our value, but many of us haven't, quote, bought the ticket by actively engaging with healthcare's transformation. The explorer's mindset we've discussed isn't just about business strategy or staying current with research. It's about reclaiming our profession's rightful position at the forefront of movement health. It's about having the courage to question whether our traditional approaches truly serve our patients' best interests in today's world. This conversation isn't necessarily comfortable, but discomfort is where growth begins. The most innovative therapists throughout history have always been those willing to challenge orthodoxy, to experiment thoughtfully, to reimagine what's possible. So as you drive home, as you walk your dog, or finish your workout listening to this episode, we hope you feel a stirring of ideas, yes, but of purpose. The explorer's journey isn't easy, but it's essential. And it doesn't require abandoning everything you know. It just simply requires the willingness to question, to learn, and to adapt. There's a colleague in your life who needs to hear this message. Someone who, like you, cares deeply about the profession and its future. Someone who might be feeling the tensions we've discussed, but hasn't found the framework to make sense of them. It could be a physician or other provider that you work with and collaborate with that you want to help understand how maybe you can partner with them better. Share this episode with them. Start talking. Be the catalyst. Because therapy's future will be written by those willing to explore it, and we believe you all have an important chapter to contribute. All of us do. So until next time, this is Dana and Alex encouraging you to keep exploring and create a future-proof PT profession. Bye for now.